I'm Rebecca, 34 years old, and for the past 3 years, I've been the primary caregiver for my mother, Helen, after my father's sudden death. While I juggled my nursing career with daily visits and medical appointments, my younger brother Marcus seemed to drift through life, expecting handouts and bailouts. Last Tuesday, while mom was in emergency heart surgery, fighting for her life, Marcus thought he had the perfect opportunity to secure his financial future by changing her will. What he didn't know was that I had installed security cameras just 2 weeks earlier, and every second of his betrayal was caught on crystal clear footage. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Growing up in the sun-baked suburbs of Phoenix, Arizona, our family appeared stable from the outside. Dad worked as an engineering supervisor at a manufacturing plant while mom taught kindergarten at the local elementary school. We lived in a modest ranch-style house with a desert landscape yard that mom lovingly maintained, despite the harsh climate. From early childhood, it became clear that Marcus and I operated under completely different sets of family expectations. I was the older child, born when my parents were young and still establishing themselves financially. Every toy, every privilege, every opportunity came with clear expectations attached. I earned my allowance through weekly chores that included helping with laundry, keeping my room spotless, and assisting mom with yard work in the blazing Arizona heat. When I wanted something beyond the basics, I had to present a compelling case to my parents, often accompanied by a plan for how I would contribute to the cost through extra chores or birthday money I had saved. Marcus, arriving 3 years later, when our parents were more financially secure, seemed to exist in a parallel universe where different rules applied. While I carefully saved my allowance for weeks to buy a new book or toy, Marcus would simply ask and receive. When he threw tantrums in stores, he was quickly appeased with purchases rather than consequences. Mom would explain to me privately that Marcus was more sensitive and needed different handling than I did. Even as a young child, I sensed the unfairness, but learned to accept it as the natural order of our family dynamic. This pattern intensified as we moved through our teenage years. During high school, I worked part-time at a local veterinary clinic, saving every dollar for college while maintaining honor roll grades. I researched scholarships, applied for financial aid, and planned my education path with military precision. Meanwhile, Marcus coasted through high school with mediocre grades, spending his afternoons playing video games or hanging out at the community pool with friends. When guidance counselors suggested he needed to improve his grades for college admission, my parents hired expensive tutors rather than requiring him to take responsibility for his academic performance. The summer before my senior year, I worked double shifts at the vet clinic and took on additional pet sitting jobs to save money for college expenses. I calculated every dollar, knowing that my parents could contribute some funding, but that the majority of my education costs would be my responsibility. That same summer, Marcus convinced my parents to pay for an expensive summer basketball camp, despite having shown no serious commitment to the sport. When the camp proved too challenging and he wanted to quit after 1 week, my parents didn't require him to finish what they had paid for. Instead, they took him on a consolation trip to California to help him feel better about the disappointment. College years revealed the true extent of the disparity in our treatment. I attended Arizona State University on a partial academic scholarship, working 20 hours a week in the campus bookstore to cover my remaining expenses. I lived in the cheapest dorm available, survived on ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches, and wore the same clothes throughout my 4 years. Every semester, I anxiously waited for financial aid to process and worked extra hours during school breaks to avoid taking on more student debt than absolutely necessary. Marcus entered the same university 2 years later with full parental funding. Not only did my parents pay his tuition, room, and board, but they also provided him with a generous monthly allowance for entertainment and eating out. They bought him a car for campus convenience while I continued to rely on the city bus system and occasional rides from friends. When Marcus struggled academically during his sophomore year, my parents paid for professional tutoring services and hired an academic coach to help him organize his schedule. Despite these advantages, he barely maintained the minimum GPA required to stay enrolled. After graduation, I immediately began working as a registered nurse at Phoenix General Hospital, grateful to finally have a steady income and the ability to start paying down my student loans. The work was demanding, with 12-hour shifts that left me physically and emotionally drained, but I found deep satisfaction in helping patients and their families navigate medical crises. I rented a small apartment near the hospital, furnished it with secondhand finds, and methodically built a modest emergency fund while paying off my educational debt. Marcus, meanwhile, graduated with a business degree he had shown little interest in pursuing and immediately moved back into our childhood bedroom. He claimed he needed time to find his passion and explore his options rather than rushing into just any job. This exploration period stretched from weeks into months, then into years. He tried brief stints in retail management, insurance sales, and even a multi-level marketing venture that he swore would make him rich. Each opportunity ended the same way, with complaints about unfair bosses, unrealistic expectations, or company policies that didn't recognize his potential. Throughout these career experiments, my parents continued to provide Marcus with financial support. They covered his car insurance, cell phone bill, and gave him spending money for social activities. When he expressed interest in starting his own business, they provided startup capital for ventures that inevitably failed within months. A food truck that never obtained proper permits, a social media consulting service with no actual clients, and a plan to flip houses despite having no construction experience or real estate knowledge. Each failure was met with sympathy and encouragement to try again, rather than any suggestion that he might need to develop more realistic expectations or work ethic. Dad's sudden heart attack at age 62 changed everything for our family. It happened on a Tuesday morning while he was getting ready for work. Mom found him collapsed in their bedroom and called 911, but by the time paramedics arrived, it was too late. The man who had anchored our family's financial stability and provided steady, if sometimes misguided, guidance was gone, leaving behind a grief-stricken wife and 2 adult children with vastly different capabilities for handling responsibility. The funeral arrangements fell primarily to me, as Marcus seemed paralyzed by the enormity of the loss. While he sat in stunned silence, I coordinated with the funeral home, managed the paperwork, and helped Mom navigate the immediate decisions that death requires. The service was beautiful, filled with Dad's coworkers and longtime friends who shared stories of his kindness and reliability. But even in grief, I couldn't help but notice how many people approached me rather than Marcus with offers of practical help, as if they instinctively recognized who would actually follow through on arrangements. In the weeks following Dad's death, the true scope of our family's new reality became clear. While Dad had been a diligent saver and had maintained life insurance, the sudden loss of his income meant significant adjustments for Mom. She would need to be more careful with spending, potentially downsize the house, and make difficult decisions about her financial future. More concerning to me was her emotional state. The woman who had always been the family's nurturing center seemed lost without her partner of 35 years. She struggled with basic daily tasks, forgot to eat regular meals, and spent hours sitting in Dad's recliner, staring out at the desert landscape they had shared. It became clear that Mom needed more support than Marcus was capable of providing. While he expressed concern and sadness about Dad's death, he seemed unable to translate those feelings into practical assistance. He would visit for an hour or two, usually when he needed something, but left the real work of caring for a grieving widow to me. I began stopping by Mom's house every day after my hospital shifts, bringing groceries, helping with household tasks, and simply providing the human connection she desperately needed.
During the estate settlement process, Dad's methodical nature became a blessing. He had maintained detailed financial records, updated beneficiary information on all accounts, and, most importantly, had created a comprehensive will just 2 years before his death. The document was straightforward and reflected his practical approach to life. Mom would inherit the house, his retirement accounts, and the majority of his assets, ensuring she could maintain her standard of living. Marcus and I were named as equal beneficiaries to receive the remaining estate after Mom's eventual passing, along with specific sentimental items Dad wanted each of us to have. The will reading took place in the office of Mr. Thompson, the family attorney who had helped Dad create the document. Mom sat between Marcus and me, still wearing the black dress she had worn to every formal occasion since the funeral. Her hands shook slightly as Mr. Thompson explained the provisions, and I found myself taking notes to help her remember the details later. The inheritance amounts weren't enormous. Dad had been a careful saver, but not wealthy. But the estate would provide Mom with security and give Marcus and me a meaningful inheritance when the time came. What struck me most during the reading was Marcus's reaction. Rather than showing grief or concern for Mom's welfare, he seemed intensely focused on the financial details. He asked specific questions about timelines, about what would happen if Mom needed long-term care, and about whether the will could be modified. When Mr. Thompson explained that Mom had full control over her inherited assets and could change her own will as she saw fit, I noticed Marcus taking careful notes. At the time, I attributed his questions to shock and the surreal nature of discussing our parents' mortality. Looking back, I realize he was already calculating. In the months following Dad's death, I settled into a routine of daily caregiving that became the new normal. My 12-hour hospital shifts were followed by stops at Mom's house, where I would check on her physical and emotional well-being, help with household maintenance, and provide companionship during the long desert evenings. Mom's grief manifested in different ways on different days. Sometimes I would find her energetically cleaning closets, sorting through Dad's belongings with determined efficiency. Other days, she would be nearly catatonic, sitting in his chair and barely acknowledging my presence. The hardest part was watching her struggle with tasks that had once been automatic. Dad had handled all the financial responsibilities, paying bills, managing investments, maintaining insurance policies. Mom had never learned to use the computer for online banking, had never balanced a checkbook, and felt overwhelmed by the stack of statements and bills that arrived each month. I spent many evenings sitting at her kitchen table, helping her understand which documents were important and creating a system she could manage independently. Marcus's visits during this period were sporadic and self-serving. He would arrive unannounced, usually when I was already there helping Mom, and often seemed surprised by the amount of work involved in maintaining her household. He would spend an hour making small talk, accept whatever food Mom offered, and then disappear for days at a time. When I suggested we create a schedule so Mom could count on regular visits from both of us, Marcus agreed enthusiastically, but never followed through. His promises to help with yard work, home repairs, or transportation to medical appointments consistently evaporated once he left her house. More troubling was his increasing focus on Mom's financial situation. During family conversations, he would steer discussions toward topics like the cost of maintaining the house, whether Mom really needed such a large property, and how difficult it must be for her to manage Dad's investments. He frequently mentioned articles he had read about elderly people being taken advantage of by financial scams, suggesting that Mom should consider having someone younger help manage her money. When Mom mentioned that she was thinking about updating her own will to reflect her new circumstances as a widow, Marcus immediately volunteered to help her research attorneys and estate planning options. Meanwhile, Marcus's own financial situation was deteriorating rapidly. His latest business venture, a service that promised to help people organize their digital photos, had failed to attract any paying customers despite months of effort. The startup money Dad had provided was gone, and Marcus was once again living in his childhood bedroom while accumulating credit card debt. He had briefly worked at a sporting goods store, but lost the job after repeatedly calling in sick to pursue what he called networking opportunities that never materialized into actual employment.
During one particularly difficult evening with Mom, she confided in me about her growing concerns regarding Marcus's future. We were sitting in her living room, sorting through photo albums, when she suddenly stopped and looked at me with tears in her eyes. "I worry about what will happen to Marcus when I'm gone," she said quietly. "You're so capable, Rebecca. You've built a career. You're responsible with money. You'll be fine no matter what. But Marcus, he's never really learned to take care of himself. I tried to reassure her that Marcus was still young and had time to develop more stability, but privately, I shared her concerns. At 29, my brother showed no signs of developing the work ethic or life skills that would allow him to support himself long term. His pattern of starting projects with enthusiasm only to abandon them when they required sustained effort had become deeply ingrained. More concerning was his apparent belief that he was entitled to financial support simply by virtue of being family, regardless of his own choices and actions. Mom's worries about Marcus intensified when she received a call from a credit card company looking for him. Apparently, he had listed her house as his address on an application and had fallen behind on payments. When she asked him about it, he dismissed her concerns and assured her it was just a temporary cash flow problem that would resolve itself once his big project came through. He had been saying the same thing about various big projects for years, but Mom's grief and worry made her more susceptible to his promises than she had been when Dad was alive to provide a reality check. Around this time, Marcus began making comments about how unfair it seemed that Mom had to worry about money at all. He would suggest that Dad should have purchased more life insurance, or that the house was too expensive for her to maintain alone. These conversations always seemed to circle back to the idea that maybe Mom should consider simplifying her financial situation by making some decisions about her estate planning sooner rather than later. He offered to research financial advisors who specialized in helping widows and volunteered to attend any meetings to provide moral support. The most unsettling conversation happened on a Sunday afternoon when I arrived at Mom's house to find Marcus already there showing her printouts from various websites about estate planning strategies. He was explaining something about tax advantages and inheritance optimization when I walked into the kitchen. Both of them looked up with guilty expressions as if I had interrupted something private. Marcus quickly gathered his papers and said he had been helping Mom understand her options for maximizing what she could pass on to her children. When I asked Mom about it later, she seemed confused about the specifics of what Marcus had been explaining. She said he was trying to help her make sure she made the best decisions for our family's future, but she admitted that much of what he had shown her was too complicated for her to fully understand. The first signs of Mom's heart problems appeared about 18 months after Dad's death. She had been experiencing what she described as flutter feelings in her chest, along with occasional shortness of breath during routine activities like climbing the stairs or working in her garden. Initially, she dismissed these symptoms as stress-related, attributing them to the grief and life changes she was still processing. When I suggested she mention them to her doctor during her annual physical, she promised she would, but then conveniently forgot to bring them up during the appointment. As a nurse, I recognize that cardiac symptoms in a recently widowed woman in her 60s should be taken seriously. But Mom had always been stubbornly independent about her health decisions. She had spent years caring for others as a teacher and seemed to resist accepting that she might need medical attention herself. It wasn't until she experienced a frightening episode while we were shopping together that she agreed to seek medical evaluation. We had been walking through the grocery store, discussing meal planning for the week ahead, when Mom suddenly stopped and grabbed my arm. Her face had gone pale, and she was pressing her hand to her chest with an expression of panic I had never seen before. "Something's wrong," she whispered, her breathing becoming rapid and shallow. I immediately guided her to a nearby bench and took her pulse, finding an irregular rhythm that confirmed my worst fears. After convincing her to let me drive her directly to the emergency room, we spent 6 hours in the hospital while doctors ran tests and monitored her heart function. The cardiologist's diagnosis was serious, but not immediately life-threatening. Mom had developed atrial fibrillation, an irregular heartbeat that increased her risk of stroke and required ongoing medical management. The doctor explained that this condition was sometimes triggered by emotional stress and was not uncommon in people who had experienced significant life changes. He prescribed medication to regulate her heart rhythm and recommended lifestyle modifications, but warned that surgery might eventually be necessary if the condition worsened. Marcus's reaction to Mom's diagnosis was typical of his approach to family crises. Initial panic, followed by apparent denial that anything serious was happening. He visited the hospital during her overnight observation, bringing flowers and expressing dramatic concern about her health. However, once she was discharged and the immediate crisis had passed, he seemed to assume that everything would return to normal without any additional effort on his part. He didn't offer to help with transportation to her follow-up cardiology appointments, didn't ask about her medications, and didn't modify his sporadic visiting schedule to provide more consistent support. What did change was Marcus's increased interest in Mom's financial affairs. During conversations about her health, he would inevitably steer the discussion toward practical concerns like the cost of her medications, whether her insurance was adequate, and how she would manage if her condition required expensive treatments. He began researching long-term care insurance and presented Mom with information about various policies, though the material seemed more focused on what would happen to her assets if she needed extended care, rather than ensuring she received quality treatment. More troubling were his questions about her estate planning in light of her new health concerns. Marcus suggested that Mom should probably update her will to reflect her medical situation, pointing out that people with heart conditions needed to be more proactive about their end-of-life planning. He offered to help her research attorneys who specialized in estate planning for people with chronic health conditions and volunteered to attend any appointments to help her understand the legal language and options. During one particularly manipulative conversation that I witnessed, Marcus painted a detailed picture of what might happen if Mom's condition deteriorated suddenly. He described scenarios where she might need expensive emergency treatments or long-term care that could quickly deplete her savings. The last thing any of us wants, he said earnestly, is for you to spend your final years worrying about money or for Rebecca and me to inherit nothing but debt because we didn't plan properly. The way he presented it, updating her will wasn't about preparing for her death, but about being a responsible parent who wanted to protect her children's financial future. Mom's response to these conversations was complex. On one hand, she seemed touched by Marcus's apparent concern for her well-being and his interest in spending time discussing important family matters. She had always worried about him more than me, and his sudden attention to practical planning made her feel like he was finally maturing and taking responsibility. On the other hand, the conversations clearly made her uncomfortable, and she often seemed overwhelmed by the complexity of the decisions Marcus was encouraging her to make. I tried to balance being supportive of Mom's autonomy while protecting her from what I increasingly saw as Marcus's manipulation. When she mentioned his suggestions about updating her will, I offered to research attorneys myself and proposed that all three of us meet together with any legal or financial advisors to ensure everyone was informed about her decisions. Marcus seemed less enthusiastic about joint meetings, suggesting that too many people might confuse Mom or make the process more stressful for her. The tension between Marcus and me reached a new level when Mom had a second cardiac episode that required another emergency room visit. This time, the irregular heartbeat was accompanied by chest pain that couldn't be ignored. After another round of tests and monitoring, her cardiologist recommended a cardiac ablation procedure, a minimally invasive surgery that would correct the electrical pathways in her heart and hopefully eliminate the irregular rhythm permanently. When the doctor explained the procedure during a family meeting at the hospital, Marcus asked detailed questions about the timeline, the recovery process, and what would happen if complications arose. He seemed particularly interested in how long Mom would be unconscious during the surgery and whether she would be coherent immediately afterward. At the time, I thought he was showing appropriate concern about the risks and recovery process. Later, I would realize he was gathering intelligence for his own purposes. The surgery was scheduled for 3 weeks later, giving Mom time to complete preoperative testing and arrange for post-surgical care. During those 3 weeks, Marcus became unusually attentive, visiting Mom almost daily and offering to help with preparations for her procedure. He researched the surgery online and presented her with information about success rates and recovery experiences from other patients. He even offered to take time off work to be at the hospital during her surgery, despite having been let go from his latest job 2 weeks earlier for what he described as personality conflicts with management. What I didn't realize at the time was that Marcus was also making his own preparations for the day of Mom's surgery.
While I focused on arranging my work schedule to be available for her care, ensuring her house was ready for her recovery, and coordinating with her medical team, Marcus was planning something far more sinister. The devoted son act he had been performing was actually cover for a plan that would take advantage of the one day when mom would be completely unconscious and unable to protect herself. His questions about the surgery timeline weren't motivated by concern for her well-being, they were reconnaissance for the perfect crime. He needed to know exactly how long he would have uninterrupted access to her house while she was under anesthesia, unable to witness what he was about to do. The attentive visits weren't about providing emotional support, they were opportunities to locate important documents and plan his approach. And his sudden interest in estate planning wasn't about protecting mom's legacy, it was about redirecting it toward himself. The most chilling aspect of Marcus's behavior during those 3 weeks was how convincingly he played the role of concerned son. He brought mom flowers, helped her organize her medications, and even cooked dinner for her twice. To anyone observing from the outside, including mom herself, he appeared to have finally stepped up as a responsible adult child facing his mother's health crisis. Even I felt hopeful that this scary situation might be the catalyst for positive change in his character and our family relationships.
My decision to install security cameras at mom's house wasn't initially motivated by suspicion of Marcus, but rather by practical concerns about her safety and my own peace of mind. As her primary caregiver, I worried constantly about what might happen during the hours when neither Marcus nor I were with her. The desert suburb where she lived was generally safe, but break-ins weren't unheard of, and I had read too many stories about elderly people being targeted by scammers who posed as utility workers or home repair contractors. The cardiac episodes had made these concerns more acute. What if mom had a medical emergency when she was alone and couldn't reach her phone? What if someone took advantage of her vulnerable state to gain access to her house? As a nurse, I had seen too many cases where elderly patients fell victim to various forms of exploitation, and I was determined not to let that happen to my mother. The security system I chose was a modern wireless setup that could be monitored remotely through a smartphone app. The package included cameras for the front door, back door, and main living areas, along with motion sensors and a central hub that would alert me immediately if anything unusual occurred. The installation technician, David, was patient and thorough, explaining how each component worked and showing me how to access the feeds from my phone. Most families find these systems really give them peace of mind, David said as he positioned the final camera in mom's living room. You can check in anytime, and if there's ever an emergency, you'll know immediately. He showed mom how the system worked too, though she seemed overwhelmed by the technology and relied on me to manage the technical aspects. What I didn't anticipate was how quickly the cameras would reveal Marcus's true character. Within the first week after installation, I began noticing concerning patterns in his behavior when he thought no one was watching. During visits when mom stepped out of the room, Marcus would open drawers and cabinets, clearly searching for something. He spent considerable time looking through the desk in Dad's old office, photographing documents with his phone before carefully returning them to their original positions. Most disturbing was his behavior during a visit when mom was napping in her bedroom. The camera footage showed Marcus systematically going through her important papers, including bank statements, insurance policies, and legal documents. He seemed particularly interested in anything related to her will or estate planning. I watched in real time from my apartment as my brother violated mom's privacy and trust in the most fundamental way possible. When I confronted him about his behavior during our next family gathering, Marcus became immediately defensive and turned the situation around on me. "I can't believe you're spying on Mom," he said with convincing indignation. "That's a complete violation of her privacy. What's next? Cameras in her bedroom?" He managed to make me feel guilty for installing security measures while completely deflecting from his own inappropriate behavior. His explanation for the document searching was smooth and practiced.
He claimed he was trying to help Mom organize her paperwork and wanted to understand her financial situation better so he could assist with planning. "Rebecca, you're always so busy with work," he said, in a tone that suggested he was the more devoted child. "I'm just trying to pick up the slack and make sure Mom doesn't get overwhelmed by all the administrative stuff she has to handle now." Mom, unfortunately, seemed to accept his explanation without question. When I gently asked her about whether she had asked Marcus to help with her paperwork, she looked confused and said she couldn't remember specifically asking him, but appreciated that he was taking initiative to be helpful. Her memory had become less reliable since Dad's death and the stress of her health problems, making it difficult for her to distinguish between what she had actually requested and what Marcus claimed she had asked him to do. The pattern of suspicious behavior intensified as Mom's surgery date approached. Marcus began asking increasingly specific questions about the procedure timeline, the hospital's visiting policies, and when Mom would be discharged. He seemed particularly interested in understanding exactly when she would be unconscious and how long the surgery was expected to take. When I suggested we could take turns staying at the hospital during the procedure, he quickly volunteered to handle the waiting room vigil alone, insisting that I needed to save my energy for helping with Mom's recovery afterward.
"You're already doing so much," Marcus said with apparent selflessness. "Let me take care of the hospital stuff so you can focus on getting her house ready for when she comes home." It was a reasonable suggestion that would have been touching if I hadn't been watching his behavior on the security cameras for weeks. During his last few visits before the surgery, Marcus's document searching became more focused and urgent. I could see him photographing specific pages from Mom's financial records and spending time on her computer, though I couldn't determine exactly what he was accessing from the camera angles. He also began asking Mom seemingly casual questions about where she kept important documents, claiming he wanted to make sure everything was organized in case of emergencies. The most concerning incident occurred 3 days before the surgery. While Mom was in the shower, Marcus accessed her computer and appeared to be printing documents. When Mom emerged from the bathroom, he quickly closed the browser and gathered papers from the printer, claiming he had been printing some information about post-surgical care that he thought would be helpful for her recovery. Mom thanked him for his thoughtfulness, completely unaware that he had been accessing her personal accounts without permission. That evening, I called Mr. Thompson, the family attorney, to ask some general questions about estate planning and document security. Without mentioning my specific concerns about Marcus, I asked about safeguards that could prevent unauthorized changes to legal documents and what steps someone would need to take to fraudulently modify a will. Mr. Thompson's answers were both informative and terrifying. Unfortunately, he explained, if someone has access to the original documents and knows enough about the deceased person's wishes and financial situation, it's not difficult to create convincing forgeries. Most people don't take adequate precautions to protect their estate planning documents from family members who might have ulterior motives. The sad reality is that these crimes often go undetected until after the victim has died, and by then it's much more difficult to prove what really happened. After hanging up from that conversation, I sat in my apartment staring at the security camera app on my phone, realizing that I might be the only thing standing between Marcus and a successful fraud that could devastate Mom's estate and our family's future. The technology I had installed to protect her from strangers might be the key to protecting her from her own son. The night before Mom's surgery, I made a decision that would prove crucial to everything that followed. Instead of simply monitoring the cameras occasionally, as I had been doing, I would watch them continuously during the hours of her procedure. If Marcus was planning something, surgery day would be his best opportunity, and I was determined to be ready. Tuesday morning arrived with the kind of crystal-clear Arizona sky that makes the desert beautiful and unforgiving at the same time. I picked Mom up at 5:30 a.m. for her 7 a.m. check-in at Phoenix General Hospital, the same facility where I worked but in a different department. She was nervous, but trying to maintain her characteristic stoicism, wearing the comfortable clothes I had helped her choose the night before, and carrying a small overnight bag with items for her recovery. "I keep thinking your father should be here for this," she said quietly as we drove through the empty morning streets. It was one of the few times she had directly acknowledged how much she missed having Dad's support during medical situations. Throughout their marriage, he had been her advocate and comfort during doctor's visits, asking the practical questions she forgot and providing the steady presence that helped her navigate healthcare decisions. "He would be proud of how brave you're being," I told her, reaching over to squeeze her hand, "and he'd want you to focus on getting better so you can enjoy all those grandchildren you keep hinting about." This earned me a small smile, though I could see the anxiety in her eyes as we pulled into the hospital parking structure. The pre-surgical process was routine but lengthy. After checking in, Mom was taken to a preparation area where nurses reviewed her medical history, confirmed her medications, and explained what would happen during and after the procedure. As her next of kin and emergency contact, I was included in all these conversations, taking careful notes about post-operative care instructions and potential complications to watch for during her recovery. Dr. Martinez, a cardiologist performing the ablation, was thorough and reassuring as he explained the procedure one final time. "The surgery typically takes between 2 and 4 hours," he told us, depending on the complexity of the electrical pathways we need to correct. "Rebecca will update you regularly during the procedure, and you're welcome to wait in the family waiting area, or we can call you when she's in recovery." This was the moment I had been dreading. According to our family plan, Marcus was supposed to handle the hospital vigil while I prepared Mom's house for her return home. From a practical standpoint, it made sense. I knew her house better, understood her medical needs, and could ensure everything was ready for a comfortable recovery. But knowing what I suspected about Marcus's intentions, the thought of leaving the hospital made me nauseous. "Actually," I said, improvising quickly, "I'd like to stay for at least the first part of the surgery until we know everything is going smoothly. Marcus can start getting the house ready, and I'll head over there once she's stable in recovery." Mom squeezed my hand gratefully, clearly relieved that I would be nearby during the most vulnerable part of her day. Marcus arrived at the hospital just as they were preparing to take Mom to the operating room. He was unusually well-dressed for the occasion, wearing slacks and a button-down shirt instead of his typical casual attire. He brought flowers for Mom and coffee for me, playing the role of thoughtful son and brother with Oscar-worthy performance. "How are you feeling, Mom?" he asked, taking her other hand and speaking in the gentle tone he reserved for times when others were watching. "I brought you those magazines you like in case you're bored during recovery." He had thought to bring reading material, which was the kind of considerate gesture that would have meant more if I hadn't seen him rifling through her personal belongings on camera. When it came time for Mom to be wheeled to the operating room, both Marcus and I walked with her as far as we were allowed. She looked small and vulnerable on the gurney, wearing the hospital gown and surgical cap that stripped away her usual dignified appearance. "I love you both," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "Take care of each other while I'm sleeping." After she disappeared through the surgical suite doors, Marcus and I stood in the hallway for an awkward moment. The obvious plan would be for us to go to the waiting area together, but I knew that wasn't what he wanted. Sure enough, he quickly suggested that he could handle the hospital vigil while I took care of the house preparations.
"There's not much point in both of us sitting here," he said reasonably. "Why don't you go get everything ready for her homecoming? I'll call you as soon as there's any news." He was so eager to get me away from the hospital that he was practically pushing me toward the exit. I pretended to consider his suggestion, then agreed with apparent reluctance. "Okay, but promise you'll call me immediately if anything changes. And I mean anything, even if it's just an update that everything is going well." I made a show of gathering my purse and jacket, giving the impression that I was heading home to prepare for Mom's recovery. What Marcus didn't know was that instead of going to Mom's house, I was heading to my own apartment, where I had set up a monitoring station with my laptop, tablet, and phone all connected to the security camera system. I had also arranged with my supervisor at the hospital to work a modified schedule that day, allowing me to monitor the situation remotely while remaining on call if Mom needed me.
The drive from the hospital to my apartment took 20 minutes, during which I resisted the urge to check the camera feeds from my phone while driving. By the time I reached my building, my hands were shaking with adrenaline and anticipation. If Marcus was going to make his move, it would be soon. He needed time to execute whatever plan he had developed, but he also couldn't risk being away from the hospital for too long without arousing suspicion. I set up my monitoring station on my dining room table, with multiple screens showing different camera angles from Mom's house. The living room camera provided a view of the main entrance and Dad's old office area, where important documents were stored. The kitchen camera covered the back entrance and the area where Mom kept her purse and keys. The front door camera would alert me the moment anyone approached the house. At exactly 9:15 a.m., 45 minutes after Mom had been taken into surgery, I saw Marcus's car pull into her driveway. My heart began pounding as I watched him sit in the car for several minutes, apparently checking his phone and looking around the neighborhood to ensure no one was observing him. The careful way he surveyed the area confirmed that whatever he was about to do, he knew it was wrong. When he finally got out of the car and approached the front door, I could see him clearly on the security camera. He moved with purpose, but also with obvious nervousness, checking over his shoulder multiple times as he used his key to enter Mom's house. The moment he stepped inside, I began recording everything, knowing that I was about to witness something that would change our family forever. What I captured over the next 2 hours would be clear evidence of a betrayal so calculated and heartless that it would destroy any possibility of reconciliation between Marcus and the rest of our family.
The first 30 minutes of Marcus's visit appeared almost innocent to anyone who didn't know what to look for. He moved through Mom's house with the casual familiarity of someone who had grown up there, initially doing things that could be explained as helpful preparation for her recovery. He straightened magazines on the coffee table, checked that her medications were organized properly, and even started a load of laundry using clothes from the hamper in her bedroom. But I could see the difference between his public behavior and his private actions. When he thought no one was watching, Marcus moved with calculated purpose rather than casual helpfulness. Every few minutes, he would check his phone, presumably monitoring the time to ensure he didn't stay too long and risk questions about his absence from the hospital. His entire demeanor was that of someone executing a carefully planned operation, rather than a son preparing his mother's home for her recovery. The transition from seemingly innocent activity to obvious criminal behavior happened at exactly 9:47 a.m. I watched as Marcus went directly to Dad's old office, a small room that Mom had left largely unchanged since his death. The mahogany desk where Dad had paid bills and managed household finances still contained all of his organizational systems, including the fireproof filing cabinet where important documents were stored. Marcus knew exactly where to look. He went straight to the filing cabinet and used a key that he had obviously obtained during one of his previous document-searching visits. Inside, he located a manila folder labeled Estate Planning in Dad's meticulous handwriting. The folder contained Mom's current will, along with copies of various other legal documents related to their financial planning. What happened next was captured in crystal clear detail by the security camera positioned to monitor the office area. Marcus removed Mom's will from the folder and spread it out on Dad's desk, photographing each page with his phone before setting the original aside. He then opened a laptop bag that he had brought with him, something I hadn't noticed during his casual entrance because it looked like any other computer bag. From the laptop bag, Marcus removed what appeared to be several printed documents. Even from the camera angle, I could see that these papers looked official, formatted similarly to legal documents with the same type of formal language and structure as the original will. He had come prepared with forged documents that he intended to substitute for Mom's legitimate will. The level of premeditation was staggering. This wasn't an impulsive decision made in a moment of desperation. It was a carefully planned fraud that Marcus had been developing for weeks, or possibly months. He had studied Mom's original will, researched the legal formatting and language requirements, and created convincing forgeries that would fool anyone who didn't have reason to suspect fraud. As I watched through the camera feed, Marcus methodically replaced Mom's original will with his forged version. The new document appeared to be substantially longer than the original, suggesting that he had made significant changes to the inheritance provisions.
He worked slowly and carefully, comparing page layouts to ensure the forged will would be filed in exactly the same position and manner as the original. The most chilling aspect of watching this crime unfold was Marcus's demeanor throughout the process. He showed no signs of guilt, remorse, or even nervousness about what he was doing. His movements were confident and practiced, suggesting he had rehearsed this procedure multiple times. He occasionally smiled to himself, particularly reviewing certain pages of the forged will, indicating satisfaction with the changes he had made to Mom's estate planning. After completing the document substitution, Marcus photographed the forged will with his phone, presumably to have a record of what he had filed in place of the original. He then carefully returned the folder to its exact position in the filing cabinet, locked the cabinet, and returned the key to whatever hiding place he had discovered during his previous searches. But Marcus wasn't finished. Over the next hour, I watched as he accessed Mom's computer, using login information he had apparently obtained during his earlier visits. From my monitoring station, I could see him navigating through various screens, though the camera angle didn't allow me to read the specific content he was accessing. His focused attention and occasional note-taking suggested he was gathering additional information related to Mom's financial accounts or legal arrangements.
During this computer session, Marcus made several phone calls, speaking in hushed tones that the security cameras couldn't pick up clearly. Based on his body language and the length of the conversations, these appeared to be substantive discussions rather than casual check-ins. I suspected he was coordinating with someone else involved in his fraudulent scheme, possibly a disreputable attorney or financial advisor who had helped him create the forged documents. The most damning evidence came when Marcus accessed Mom's email account and began deleting messages. I watched as he systematically removed correspondence with Mr. Thompson, the family attorney, along with emails related to estate planning and financial management. He was clearly trying to eliminate any electronic trail that might contradict the changes he had made to her will or raise questions about the document's authenticity. At one point during his computer session, Marcus's phone rang with what appeared to be an important call. His reaction was immediate and anxious. He quickly answered and began speaking in urgent, worried tones. While I couldn't hear the conversation, his body language suggested he was receiving unexpected news that disrupted his timeline. He kept checking his watch and looking toward the door, apparently concerned about being discovered. The phone call lasted approximately 10 minutes, during which Marcus appeared to be receiving instructions or updates that required him to modify his plans. After hanging up, he returned to the computer with increased urgency, working faster than before and occasionally cursing under his breath when programs didn't respond quickly enough. At 11:23 a.m., nearly 2 hours after entering Mom's house, Marcus began his cleanup process. He methodically wiped down surfaces he had touched, emptied the printer's memory to remove any record of documents he might have printed, and cleared the browser history to eliminate evidence of his activities. His attention to these details proved that he understood the criminal nature of his actions and was taking steps to avoid detection. Before leaving, Marcus did something that demonstrated the calculated cruelty of his betrayal. He prepared a small bouquet of flowers from Mom's garden and wrote a note saying, "Welcome home, Mom. Hope your recovery goes smoothly. Love, Marcus." He placed this touching display on her kitchen table, creating evidence of his supposed visit to prepare for her homecoming while concealing the fact that he had spent the time committing fraud against her. As Marcus finally left the house at 11:35 a.m., I felt a combination of rage, disgust, and determination that I had never experienced before. In less than 2 hours, I had watched my brother transform from someone I merely didn't respect into someone I now considered a genuine threat to our family's security and well-being. The footage I had captured would not only protect Mom's estate, but would also ensure that Marcus faced appropriate consequences for his betrayal. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
The hours immediately following Marcus's departure from Mom's house were among the most emotionally challenging of my life. I sat in my apartment, staring at the multiple screens that had just shown me irrefutable evidence of my brother's betrayal, trying to process the magnitude of what I had witnessed.
The person I had grown up with, shared holidays with, and worried about for years had just committed a calculated crime against our unconscious mother. My first instinct was to call the police immediately, but my nursing training had taught me the importance of remaining calm during crises and making decisions based on logic rather than emotion. I needed to think through the implications of what I had witnessed and develop a strategy that would protect Mom's interests while ensuring Marcus faced appropriate consequences for his actions. I began by saving multiple copies of the security footage to different devices and cloud storage accounts. The video evidence was damning, but only if it was preserved properly and remained accessible for legal proceedings. I exported the footage in multiple formats, created detailed timestamps of key events, and prepared written summaries of everything I had observed. If this case went to court, I wanted to ensure that no technical failures or legal technicalities could compromise the evidence. While I was working on preserving the footage, my phone rang with updates from the hospital. Mom's surgery was progressing normally, with Dr. Martinez reporting that the procedure was more straightforward than anticipated and should be completed within the next hour. Under normal circumstances, this would have been wonderful news. Instead, it meant that I had very little time to decide how to handle the Marcus situation before Mom woke up and expected both of her children to be supportive and present during her recovery. The next call came from Marcus himself, right on schedule according to his carefully planned timeline. "Hey, Rebecca," he said in a voice filled with apparent concern and exhaustion. "Just wanted to update you that Mom's surgery is going really well. The doctor thinks she'll be in recovery within the hour. How are things going at the house?" The casual normalcy of his voice, knowing what I had just watched him do, made me feel physically sick. "Everything's ready for her to come home," I managed to say, fighting to keep my own voice steady. "Did you get a chance to check on anything while I was busy here?" "Oh yeah, I stopped by briefly to make sure everything looked good. I even picked some flowers from her garden and left them on the kitchen table. I thought it would be a nice surprise when she gets home." The fact that he mentioned the flowers, the detail I had watched him use to create evidence of his supposed innocent visit, proved that he had no idea his crime had been witnessed and recorded. After hanging up from that disturbing conversation, I called Mr. Thompson, the family attorney, and explained that I needed an emergency consultation regarding potential estate fraud. I provided him with a general overview of what I had discovered without initially revealing that the perpetrator was my own brother. Mr. Thompson was immediately concerned and asked me to come to his office that afternoon with any evidence I had gathered. This type of situation is unfortunately more common than people realize. Family members often have access to important documents and know enough about the deceased's intentions to create convincing forgeries. The key is always documentation and evidence, which it sounds like you have in abundance. He went on to explain the legal process for addressing will fraud, including the steps that would need to be taken to restore Mom's original estate planning documents and pursue criminal charges against the perpetrator. The most important thing right now is securing the forged documents before they can be destroyed or further modified. Once we have physical evidence along with your video footage, we'll have a very strong case. While I was gathering evidence and consulting with the attorney, Mom was waking up in the hospital recovery room, unaware that her son had just stolen her life's work and financial security. The nurses reported that she was doing well, asking for both of her children and expressing gratitude for the love and support we had shown during her health crisis. The irony was devastating.
I arrived at the hospital just as Mom was being moved from recovery to a regular room. She looked pale and tired, but alert, with the kind of relief that comes after successfully surviving a medical procedure you've been dreading. "How did everything go at the house?" she asked weakly, squeezing my hand as I sat beside her bed. "Everything's perfect," I assured her, which was technically true. The house was ready for her recovery, and I had also gathered the evidence needed to protect her from Marcus's fraud. "Marcus left you some beautiful flowers from your garden, and we've made sure you'll have everything you need for a comfortable recovery." Marcus arrived at the hospital 30 minutes later carrying coffee and magazines and once again playing the role of devoted son. Watching him interact with Mom, knowing what he had done while she was unconscious, required every ounce of self-control I possessed.
He asked about her pain levels, discussed her discharge timeline with the nurses, and made plans for her homecoming as if he were genuinely concerned about her well-being rather than calculating how to profit from her eventual death. The most challenging moment came when Mom thanked both of us for taking such good care of her during the surgery. "I'm so lucky to have children who love me enough to put their own lives on hold to make sure I'm okay," she said with tears in her eyes. "Your father would be so proud of how you've both stepped up during this difficult time." Marcus accepted her gratitude with apparent grace, even reaching over to squeeze my shoulder in a gesture of sibling solidarity. "We're family," he said with convincing emotion. "This is what family does for each other." The hypocrisy was staggering, but I maintained my composure, knowing that confronting him publicly would only create additional stress for Mom during her vulnerable recovery period. That evening, after Mom had been discharged and was settled comfortably in her own home, I made the most difficult decision of my life. I called Marcus and asked him to meet me at a neutral location the following day for a conversation about family planning and Mom's future care. I didn't reveal that I knew about his criminal activities, but I made it clear that we needed to have a serious discussion about our respective roles and responsibilities. "Of course," Marcus agreed readily, probably assuming I wanted to discuss practical arrangements for Mom's ongoing care, or perhaps even financial planning that might benefit his fraudulent scheme. "I think it's great that we're both so committed to making sure Mom has everything she needs." As I prepared for what would be the most confrontational conversation of my life, I felt a strange combination of dread and determination. In less than 24 hours, I would destroy Marcus's criminal plan and probably our family relationships permanently. But protecting Mom from his betrayal was worth any personal cost, and the evidence I had gathered would ensure that justice was served regardless of the family drama that would inevitably follow.
I chose to meet Marcus at a coffee shop in downtown Phoenix, far enough from Mom's neighborhood that we wouldn't risk her overhearing our conversation if things became heated. The location was public enough to prevent him from becoming physically aggressive, but private enough for us to discuss sensitive family matters without attracting unwanted attention. I arrived 30 minutes early, securing a corner table and testing the video recording function on my phone to ensure I captured every word of what was about to unfold. Marcus arrived exactly on time, carrying a folder that immediately caught my attention. He looked well-rested and confident, dressed in business casual clothing that suggested he was taking this meeting seriously. The folder likely contained documents related to his fraudulent scheme, possibly backup copies of the forged will or additional materials he planned to use in manipulating Mom's estate planning. "Thanks for setting this up," Marcus said as he sat down across from me, ordering a large coffee with obvious satisfaction. "I've been thinking we really need to coordinate better on Mom's care. Yesterday made me realize how much work is involved in making sure she has everything she needs." His casual reference to yesterday, the day he had committed fraud against our unconscious mother, demonstrated either remarkable self-control or complete absence of conscience. I let him talk for the first few minutes, curious to see how he would frame the conversation and whether he would reveal any details about his criminal activities. Marcus spoke enthusiastically about creating care schedules, managing Mom's medications, and ensuring she followed all of her post-surgical restrictions. He presented himself as someone who had recently discovered the depth of family responsibility and was eager to contribute meaningfully to Mom's well-being. "I've also been thinking about her long-term security," Marcus continued, opening his folder and removing several official-looking documents. "I did some research on estate planning for people with chronic health conditions, and I think there are some changes Mom should consider to protect her assets and minimize tax implications for her estate." The documents he showed me appeared to be legitimate educational materials about estate planning, but I suspected they were props designed to make his suggestions seem researched and professional rather than self-serving. He had clearly prepared talking points about tax strategies, asset protection, and inheritance optimization that would sound convincing to someone who didn't understand his true motivations. "Excuse me, Marcus," I interrupted, setting my coffee cup down with enough force to get his complete attention. "I need to tell you something important, and I want you to listen very carefully before you respond."
The change in my tone caused him to stop mid-sentence and look at me with sudden wariness. I know what you did yesterday while Mom was in surgery. I know you went to her house, accessed her personal documents, and made unauthorized changes to her estate planning materials. I have detailed evidence of everything you did, and I've already consulted with an attorney about the legal implications of your actions. The transformation in Marcus's appearance was immediate and dramatic. The color drained from his face, his confident posture collapsed, and his hands began trembling slightly as he processed what I had just revealed. For several seconds, he simply stared at me in shocked silence, apparently trying to determine how much I actually knew versus how much I might be guessing. "I don't know what you think you saw," Marcus said, but his voice lacked any conviction. "I stopped by Mom's house to make sure everything was ready for her recovery, just like we planned. I picked some flowers and made sure her medications were organized. If you think there's something suspicious about that, maybe you're the one with problems."
I pulled out my phone and opened the security camera app, turning the screen toward him so he could see the timestamp and video quality of the footage I had captured. "This is the camera feed from Dad's office," I explained calmly. "It shows you entering the room at 9:47 a.m., accessing the filing cabinet with a key you had obtained during previous unauthorized searches, and systematically replacing Mom's original will with forged documents you brought with you." Marcus's attempt to maintain his innocence crumbled as he saw the crystal-clear footage of his criminal activities. The video showed him in perfect detail, handling documents, operating the computer, and working with obvious premeditation and skill. There was no possible explanation for his behavior other than deliberate fraud, and we both knew it. "Rebecca, you don't understand," Marcus said desperately, his voice dropping to a whisper as he realized the magnitude of his situation. "I wasn't trying to hurt Mom or steal anything from her. I was trying to protect our family's financial future and make sure the estate planning reflected what Dad would have wanted." This justification was so absurd that I almost laughed out loud. Dad created Mom's will with her input and their attorney's guidance. What you replaced it with was designed to benefit you at her expense and mine. That's not protection, Marcus. That's theft. Marcus leaned forward, his desperation becoming more apparent as he grasped for any argument that might minimize his culpability. "Look, I made some mistakes in judgment, but I was trying to solve problems for our whole family. Mom's health is getting worse, her medical bills are going to be enormous, and if we don't plan properly, there won't be anything left for anyone to inherit. So your solution was to forge legal documents and commit fraud?" I asked incredulously. "Marcus, what you did is a felony. You violated Mom's trust, stole her autonomy over her own estate, and put our entire family at legal risk. There's no justification for what I watched you do." The reality of his situation was finally sinking in. Marcus sat back in his chair, running his hands through his hair, and looking around the coffee shop as if seeking an escape route. "What do you want from me? What's it going to take to make this go away?" "This isn't going away," I told him firmly. "What's going to happen is that we're going to restore Mom's original will, return any assets you've already attempted to redirect, and ensure that you face appropriate legal consequences for your actions. The only question is whether you cooperate with this process or make it more difficult for everyone involved." Marcus's response revealed the depth of his entitlement and self-centeredness. Rather than expressing remorse for betraying Mom's trust or concern about the pain his actions would cause her, he immediately began calculating how to minimize the impact on himself. "If we involve lawyers and courts, this whole thing will become public. Is that really what you want? Do you want Mom to spend her remaining years dealing with family legal battles and knowing that her own son betrayed her?" It was a manipulative argument designed to make me feel responsible for the consequences of his criminal behavior. Mom has a right to know what happened to her estate planning documents, and she has a right to be protected from future fraud attempts. Your actions created the situation, not my decision to address them.
The conversation continued for another hour, with Marcus alternately trying to justify his behavior, minimize its significance, and negotiate for reduced consequences. But as he gradually understood that I had irrefutable evidence and was determined to pursue legal remedies, his desperation gave way to anger and blame shifting that revealed his true character more clearly than years of family interactions ever had.
The immediate aftermath of my confrontation with Marcus involved a series of urgent meetings with Mr. Thompson to begin the legal process of undoing the fraud and protecting Mom's estate from further manipulation. The attorney was both impressed by the quality of evidence I had gathered and appalled by the calculated nature of Marcus's betrayal. In 30 years of estate planning, I've rarely seen fraud this premeditated committed against a living victim, he told me during our emergency consultation. The first step was securing Mom's house and removing Marcus's access to her personal documents and financial information. Mr. Thompson arranged for a locksmith to change all the locks immediately, and I confiscated the spare key that Marcus had been using for his unauthorized visits. We also contacted her bank and investment accounts to alert them about potential fraud attempts and to require additional verification for any changes to beneficiary information or account access. The forged will that Marcus had planted in Mom's filing cabinet was removed by Mr. Thompson personally, who photographed it extensively before securing it as evidence. His legal team analyzed the document and confirmed that it would have redirected approximately 70% of Mom's estate to Marcus, including the house, her primary investment accounts, and most of her personal belongings. My inheritance would have been reduced to a token amount that wouldn't have covered even a modest car purchase. What made the fraud even more sophisticated was that Marcus had researched legitimate estate planning strategies and incorporated them into his forged will in ways that would have seemed reasonable to anyone who didn't know Mom's actual wishes. He had included provisions for charitable donations that made him appear generous, tax optimization strategies that seemed financially savvy, and even a modest inheritance for me that would have prevented immediate suspicion about the dramatic changes. The criminal complaint we filed with the Phoenix Police Department was taken seriously due to the clear video evidence and the substantial dollar amount involved in the fraud. Detective Sarah Williams, who specialized in white-collar crimes, reviewed the security footage and immediately recognized the premeditation and skill involved in Marcus's criminal activities. This isn't someone who made an impulsive bad decision, she explained. This is someone who planned and executed a sophisticated fraud operation. The hardest part of the entire process was telling Mom what had happened. 3 days after her surgery, when she was feeling stronger and more alert, I sat down with her in her living room to explain why we had changed the locks on her house and why Marcus hadn't been visiting since she came home from the hospital. I had prepared for this conversation extensively, consulting with both Mr. Thompson and Detective Williams about how to present the information in a way that wouldn't cause additional health complications. Mom, I need to tell you something difficult about what happened while you were in surgery, I began, sitting beside her on the sofa and holding her hand. Marcus came to the house and made unauthorized changes to your personal documents, including your will. I have video evidence of what he did, and we've already taken steps to protect your estate and restore your original legal documents. Her initial reaction was confusion rather than anger. I don't understand, she said slowly. Why would Marcus need to change anything? And how did you know what he was doing? The concept that her son had committed fraud against her while she was unconscious was so foreign to her worldview that she struggled to process the information even when I explained it clearly. When I showed her selected portions of the security footage, her confusion transformed into something deeper and more painful than simple anger. I watched my mother's face as she recognized her son systematically violating her trust and stealing her autonomy over her own estate planning.
The betrayal was devastating, not just because of the financial implications, but because it shattered her fundamental beliefs about Marcus's character and their relationship. "He was planning for me to die," she whispered after viewing the footage of Marcus replacing her will. "While I was fighting for my life in surgery, he was in my house planning how to benefit from my death." The stark reality of his actions, presented in video form, made it impossible for her to rationalize or minimize what had happened.
Mom's emotional response was complex and evolved over several days as she processed the magnitude of Marcus's betrayal. Initially, she experienced shock and disbelief, repeatedly asking to review the evidence as if hoping she had misunderstood what she was seeing. This was followed by intense sadness and grief for the son she thought she knew, mourning the loss of the relationship she had believed they shared. The anger came later, building gradually as she began to understand the full implications of what Marcus had attempted. "I sacrificed so much for that boy," she said during one of our conversations. "I enabled his irresponsibility, made excuses for his failures, and supported him financially for years. And his response was to try to steal my life's work while I was unconscious and helpless." Marcus's attempts to contact Mom directly were blocked by the new security measures we had implemented, but he tried repeatedly to reach her through intermediary family members and mutual friends. His messages, which were documented and preserved as evidence, revealed a consistent pattern of manipulation and blame shifting, rather than genuine remorse or accountability. In one particularly manipulative voice wail, Marcus claimed that I had misinterpreted his actions and was turning Mom against him out of jealousy and spite. He insisted that he had been trying to help organize her affairs and that any changes to her documents were mistakes rather than intentional fraud. This message was particularly damaging to any possibility of reconciliation because it demonstrated that even after being caught with video evidence, Marcus was still lying and trying to manipulate Mom's perceptions. The legal proceedings moved forward with efficiency due to the overwhelming evidence and Marcus's inability to provide any credible defense for his actions. Detective Williams arrested him at his apartment 2 weeks after the confrontation, charging him with felony fraud, identity theft, and elder abuse. The charges carried potential sentences ranging from several years in prison to substantial financial penalties and restitution requirements. Marcus's attorney initially attempted to negotiate a plea agreement that would avoid prison time in exchange for full restitution and admission of guilt. However, the prosecution was reluctant to offer lenient terms due to the premeditated nature of the crime and the vulnerability of the victim. The district attorney's office viewed the case as an opportunity to send a strong message about elder fraud and the importance of protecting seniors from exploitation by family members. Throughout this legal process, Mom showed remarkable strength and determination to see justice served. Despite the emotional pain of pursuing criminal charges against her own son, she understood that failing to hold Marcus accountable would send the message that his behavior was acceptable and potentially enable him to victimize others in the future. "I won't let him destroy other families the way he tried to destroy ours," she told me after giving her statement to the police. "If I don't stand up for myself now, he'll never learn that actions have consequences, and he'll probably try this again with someone else's family." Her resolve was both inspiring and heartbreaking, representing the final stage of her evolution from enabling mother to protective victim who refused to allow further abuse.
6 months after Marcus's arrest, the legal proceedings reached their conclusion with a plea agreement that satisfied both the prosecution and our family's desire for justice. Faced with overwhelming video evidence and the testimony of multiple expert witnesses, Marcus finally accepted responsibility for his actions and agreed to plead guilty to felony fraud and elder abuse charges. The final sentence included 18 months in minimum security prison, 5 years of probation, complete restitution of all legal fees and costs, and a permanent restraining order preventing him from contacting Mom without court supervision. The restitution requirements were particularly significant because they ensured that our family wouldn't bear the financial burden of Marcus's criminal behavior. He was required to pay all attorney fees,
court costs, security system expenses, and additional estate planning fees necessary to restore Mom's legitimate documents and protect her assets from future fraud attempts. The total amount exceeded $40,000, representing a substantial financial consequence that would impact Marcus's life for years to come. Perhaps more importantly, the permanent restraining order provided Mom with legal protection and peace of mind that allowed her to focus on her health and recovery without fear of further manipulation or harassment. The court recognized that Marcus's betrayal of trust during her vulnerable medical condition represented a pattern of elder abuse that required ongoing supervision and intervention to prevent future incidents. The months following Marcus's sentencing were a period of healing and rebuilding for both Mom and me. Her physical recovery from the heart surgery progressed smoothly, with her cardiologist reporting excellent results from the ablation procedure and no signs of recurring arrhythmia. More challenging was her emotional recovery from the betrayal and the grief of losing the relationship she had believed she shared with Marcus. Mom began attending a support group for seniors who had experienced financial abuse by family members, finding comfort in connecting with others who understood the unique pain of being victimized by someone you loved and trusted. The group provided her with strategies for processing her grief while maintaining her sense of self-worth and dignity despite the violation of trust she had experienced. "I'm learning that I wasn't a bad mother for enabling Marcus," she told me after several months of group therapy. "I was a loving mother who made mistakes in trying to protect my child from consequences. The difference is important because one makes me a failure and the other makes me human." Her ability to distinguish between reasonable parental concern and harmful enabling was crucial to her emotional healing. The security camera system that had originally been installed to protect Mom from strangers ironically became the tool that protected her from her own son. We upgraded the system after the incident, adding more sophisticated monitoring capabilities and professional monitoring services that would alert emergency responders if she ever needed help when I wasn't available. My own relationship with Mom deepened significantly during this period as we navigated the legal proceedings and emotional aftermath together. The crisis had eliminated any pretense or family dysfunction that had previously complicated our interactions, allowing us to develop a more honest and supportive relationship based on mutual respect rather than traditional family roles. "I owe you an apology that's long overdue," Mom said during one of our evening conversations. "I spent so many years worrying about Marcus and trying to fix his problems that I took your strength and independence for granted. I never adequately recognized or appreciated everything you sacrificed to take care of our family." Her acknowledgement was healing in ways I hadn't expected. For years, I had felt invisible within our family dynamic, valued primarily for my reliability and capability, rather than being celebrated for my achievements or supported during my own challenges. The crisis had forced us all to confront the reality of our relationships and recognize the differences between genuine love and dysfunctional enabling. The most unexpected development was the gradual improvement in my own life as the stress and drama of Marcus's constant financial crises was removed from our family system. Without the ongoing anxiety about his latest financial disaster or relationship failure, I found myself with emotional energy to invest in my own goals and relationships. I began dating seriously for the first time in years, pursued continuing education opportunities in my nursing career, and even started planning for a future that didn't revolve around managing family emergencies. Mom's estate planning was completely restructured with additional legal protections to prevent future fraud attempts. Mr. Thompson helped her create a more sophisticated will that included multiple witnesses, notarization requirements, and specific language that would make forgery much more difficult. She also established a trust structure that would provide ongoing financial management if her health declined and she needed assistance with complex decisions.
The new legal documents reflected her evolved understanding of fairness and accountability. While Marcus remained a beneficiary in her will, his inheritance was significantly reduced and placed in a trust with strict oversight requirements. The majority of her estate would now go to me, along with specific provisions for charitable donations to organizations that support elder abuse prevention and family counseling services.
1 year after the incident, I received an unexpected letter from Marcus while he was serving his prison sentence. The letter was very different from his previous communications, containing what appeared to be genuine remorse and accountability for his actions, rather than the manipulation and blame shifting that had characterized his earlier responses. I know that saying "I'm sorry" doesn't undo what I did or repair the trust I destroyed, he wrote. I've had a lot of time to think about my choices and the pattern of entitlement and selfishness that led to this situation. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know that I understand now how much pain I caused and how wrong my actions were. The letter went on to describe the counseling and addiction treatment he was receiving in prison, including programs specifically designed to address the psychological factors that contribute to elder abuse and family financial crimes. He acknowledged that his behavior had been part of a larger pattern of expecting others to solve his problems and feeling entitled to resources he hadn't earned. While the letters showed signs of genuine growth and self-reflection, both Mom and I remained cautious about the possibility of future relationship. Trust, once broken so completely, would require years of consistent behavior and accountability to rebuild, if it could be rebuilt at all. Today, 2 years after the incident, Mom's health remains stable, and her financial security is protected by robust legal safeguards and ongoing professional oversight. Our family dynamic has settled into a new normal, characterized by honesty, appropriate boundaries, and mutual respect, rather than the dysfunction and enabling that had defined our relationships for decades. The security cameras remain active and monitored, serving as both practical protection and symbolic reminder of the importance of vigilance in protecting vulnerable family members from exploitation. The technology that captured Marcus's betrayal continues to provide peace of mind and documentation of Mom's daily well-being. Most importantly, this experience taught us that genuine family love sometimes requires making difficult decisions that prioritize protection over preservation of relationships. By refusing to enable Marcus's criminal behavior and insisting on accountability and consequences, we ultimately created the possibility for authentic healing and growth that wouldn't have been possible through continued denial and enabling. The lesson that emerged from this painful experience is that true family loyalty means protecting each other from harm, even when that harm comes from within the family itself. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to refuse to participate in their destructive behavior and insist that they face the consequences of their choices. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision to protect a family member from another family member's harmful behavior? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more real-life stories about family boundaries and protecting vulnerable loved ones. Remember, standing up for what's right isn't always easy, but it's always worth it.